It's Renee.
And Gil from the Rich Relationship Refuge.
And guess what? We're here and we are so excited to be with you tonight. Tonight, when you see us sitting on this couch, just know that it's going to be it's going to be a very challenging topic. I want to tell a little story. How many of you, when you were little, you had to take castor oil? You had to take castor oil when you were little. Tell me, did you have to take when you were little?
Oh yeah. Well, you had the pickle chaser and the
You had a
Kool-Aid.
pickle?
Yeah, it was still nasty though.
How many of you took castor oil when you were little and you got a pickle as a chaser, or you got
That's all.
Kool-Aid?
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay, when we were growing up and we had to take castor oil, we were given this beautiful thing right here, an orange. And I remember today why I, for a long time, didn't like oranges. Because oranges reminded me of taking castor oil. So I had to overcome that. But I want to talk about, what we're going to talk about tonight is, just like sometimes our past experiences make our present experiences kind of tainted, we believe that marriage is getting a bad rap because we're blaming marriage for the things that we bring into the relationships.
Okay.
So that's a nice topic, is there's no such thing as marriage problems. There's only individual problems that we bring into our marriage. And so if you believe that that's true, put it in the chat. If you're watching now or watching later, please, sir, please, ma'am, please share. Please let your friends know we're live. And we want to just sit and just have a conversation with you about no more marriage problems. Well,
No, go ahead.
yeah, no marriage problems. It's individual problems.
Right. We've been missing you guys for a couple of weeks. We had a chance to come back after we were doing a couple the premarital thing at the church for, it was an intense weekend. That was great. And then we had our guest on. That was good and that was great.
And we're gonna have a guest on next Saturday.
Okay. So then, but this is something that I really enjoy talking about. And if you're coming on and you just join in, we haven't gotten into the topic yet. We just kind of greeting everybody, giving everybody a chance to come on. Since it's been a little bit since we got there. But we just wanted to come on and just share some of the things that we kind of went over in the teaching a little bit the past weekend. It's always kind of wrapped into anytime you talk about relationships or even some type of coaching or even premarital, whether you've been engaged or you're engaged or even married, all these things are still going to be applicable to relationships as we know them today.
Yeah, because a lot of times what we realize, and one of the things that I really have come to a realization, and we say it all the time, there's no such thing as marriage problems. And I've been doing a lot of lives. Thanks for you guys who have,
But you got to finish that statement.
Thanks for those of you who have joined us on the live. But the reason why we want to do this episode is because we always say that there's no such things as marriage problems. They're only individual problems you bring into your marriage, but no one has ever asked us what they were.
So we're going to share, and there is never a all-inclusive list. And we never talk about that or even say that there's a one-size-fits-all, because everybody's relationship is uniquely different and everybody's relationship has its own characters and qualities and things like that. But this is something that we've just noticed as a common thread through all the couples, I won't say all, through a lot of the couples that we've been working with.
There's some common denominators.
There's a commonality and common denominator, like you said, that it just seemed to always come up almost regardless of what topic we're talking about.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about the marriage problems.
Yes, and we're going to call them problems. Well, they're actually not marriage problems. They're individual problems that we bring into our marriage. And unfortunately, because we're married, we don't realize that those problems were there before.
And it's all, and even in this, you could always get better at anything as long as you practice it, especially when you
got to get the reps in.
You got to get the reps in, but when you get new skills, you have to apply it to your relationship. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So we want to jump in because we usually come on here for about a half hour. And if you got something in the chat, put it in the chat and we'll see it there. And if we don't respond online while we going live, we'll definitely respond in the comments afterwards. And we'd like to share with the community all the things that we talk about, because we're all at different stages and at different areas in our relationship, and we all can get better at our relationship as we share these things with you. So the first one we want to talk about is unresolved past traumas. Is number
Yes.
one, unresolved past trauma. Hey, Mr. Mike, appreciate you joining us.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
So you can talk about the first one. You mentioned childhood. Well, as we were getting ready, Renee mentioned the childhood stuff. And these are things that you bring into your relationship now or even in the future, if you're not in a relationship, that you need to be conscious of that can have an impact on your relationship. So you talk about past trauma.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we don't really, like I was talking about the orange, because growing up, um, my mom gave me castor oil with an orange. For a long time, I didn't like oranges because it made me think about taking castor oil.
A bad experience.
Yeah, so my bad experience messed up my experience with orange. Well, now, recently, within the past, I'll say the past few months, I actually like oranges again. But it took me a long time to overcome that. And so sometimes there's things that have happened to you when you were little that from your past that are still affecting you in your present. And one of the things that we noticed when we were talking with and working with couples over the years and just consistently, we realize that, and we realize it in ourselves,
Yeah, absolutely.
because there are things that I did because I saw my parents do it, and there are things that Gil did because he saw it, and there are things that we didn't like doing. Like I'll use one example was submission. Submission was a really big issue for me because the women in my family were very
strong,
dominant and very strong. And so we have to be careful that we don't allow the things that we experience and the things that happen to us in our childhood to affect us in our present day relationship.
Because you always want to bring the best version of yourself. And if you're locked into or you're being held
captive
by some of the past things that has happened to you, and you bring it into, and that's what brings us to another point about some unresolved past trauma. And I think a lot of people can relate to this is if you look at it from your previous relationships. All people, or I won't say all again, I hate those all-inclusive words, but most people who come into their relationships, it's almost impossible not to bring some of the experiences that you've had in your previous relationships into your present one. You know, and I'm not saying it from a comparison standpoint, but it's always important to be conscious that you bring them in. You were going to say something.
I think about, even though we got married at 21, we started dating when we were 14, but we started dating seriously at 18. I had some bad experiences
with previous
relationships. And I think if we're honest, if the relationship that you were in before was so great, you would not be in it.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why relationships end. And so for me, one of the things I was used to guys not keeping their word.
Right.
So I brought that into our relationship with Gil, and I automatically assumed that if there's any little variance in what he said, that he's smiling.
I got it. Because every time this comes up, I always think about, I call it the gas station event.
Hi.
Hey, Carolyn. Hey, Colin and Queen. Thank you, Coco. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
I always think about this one experience that when Renee, to her point that she talked about people holding their word, when I was helping a friend while I was in high school who bought a gas station. He hadn't hired employees and anything like that. And so I decided to go and help him, but I was supposed to meet up with Renee at a certain time.
Yeah.
And when I didn't make it there at that time, I think that was a previous relationship trauma.
It reminded me of
that
what happened
resurfaced.
Before.
And she came at me in an accusatory manner, like I had done something wrong. And I had an honest, legitimate reason why I was late. It's not like I didn't show up, or did I not? I didn't show up, but I did call after the fact, and we talked about it. And at the time, you know, you can talk about something and it'll be just a conflict. But if you don't get to the root of the conflict, it's still going to just keep resurfacing. But we talked about it. And I don't even know if it was years later about, you have to look at the person's track record. If you had a previous bad experience with someone in their relationship, and then all of a sudden they do something, a new person comes into your relationship, say you're in now, and they do some of the old things, you got to look at the track record. Have they showed you a pattern of continuous bad things that they've done, or growth areas, or however you want to describe it, or things that remake it, that trauma kind of resurface?
Yeah. And so a lot of times when we're in new relationships, we have to evaluate our own heart and say, okay, so let me look at this. Now, he did this one thing but he's done 25 good things. So should I let the one thing that reminded me of someone else cancel out all the 25 good things that this person has done? And so that's how we have to be careful that we don't allow our past experiences, our past pain, to make us not move forward in relationships. If you guys have questions
Or you got chime in,
for
it's a
you,
community, yeah.
how has it been for you? Do you believe that your unresolved past pain or trauma is affecting how you're moving in relationships today? Put that in the
Yeah,
chat.
put
Let
it
us
in the
know.
chat. And I see somebody got a birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday!
And so we're actually going to move forward. So we're talking about marriage problems or problems that you're not necessarily just going to have in a marriage, but even in a relationship.
Well, the
These
problems that people bring
bring
into
their marriage,
relationships,
yeah.
and marriage gets the blame.
Yep, exactly. So let's talk about the big number 2. And this is something: unmet expectations.
Yes.
You want to start out with that one?
You know, I think for women it may be unrealistic and uncommunicated expectations, where men's may be unmet. I think for women, ours is more uncommunicated because we have things that we want and that we need and that we desire, and we don't know how to talk about it and share it. So I think that's a big part of what happens. You know, there's things that you may like or not like, or things that you may need, and you may not know how to communicate it. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's an important part of dealing with your uncommunicated, or you just say, well, he should just know. He should just know what I
Yeah,
want.
yeah, and Colin, this is kind of answering your question when you talk about when you have a significant other and they just don't seem like they're getting anything from you or getting the information. It seems like you keep going in circles over and over and over. This may be a root of unmet or uncommunicated expectations. Because everyone has them. Even especially if you're new in your relationship, maybe you haven't vocalized it or said it because you may not even be aware that
Of
you
what
have
they
turned
are.
it into an expectation that you have for this person. And over time, those things are going to come up. But if you don't really identify what those can be, you can actually be going in a circle of not understanding why do we keep coming back to this thing or this issue when I thought it was resolved. And I love the way you said that about people can't read your mind.
No, they can't.
And sometimes we have problems with communicating what we need. And we're going to get to that
Or
when we talk
want.
about the third one about what you need when it comes to communication. You have to be able to clearly articulate what's going on in you first before you can put an expectation for somebody to help you either resolve it or help you flesh it out to understand what's kind of going on in me, but also with us in our relationship that's causing a problem overall, whether it's in your marriage or even in your long-term relationship.
Yeah. And I think another big one is unrealistic expectations. I think it's unrealistic to expect that the other person isn't going to fail you, disappoint you, tell you they're gonna do something they're not gonna do.
Oh yeah.
That a part of it is learning how to extend grace and empathy to one another, and I think that that's where we really learn to do that is in
Yeah.
relationships. And so it's just a matter of, is this one thing enough to make you dissolve the relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that Miss Coco saying that as far as push the like button if you like the kind of topics that we're talking about, because
Yes.
the like button will help us get this content out to other people who
Yes.
you
Give us some
know.
hearts.
Yeah, and all those, we appreciate that. So, and I even think when it comes to those unmet expectations, we all have personal statements. Sometimes they come
Or
in the
the
mass
intervals.
intervals, or sometimes they come in the voice of a deal breaker
Yeah.
that you haven't communicated, especially if you're in a relationship and you haven't clearly vocalized what it is that you need from this person in the relationship. And sometimes it takes conflict to come up in order for those expectations to come out. And if you don't let things come up, I love the way we teach it as far as conflict is an opportunity.
It is.
Conflict is an opportunity for you to really get on one accord, one page, and as far as really getting to the root of some of these things that we kind of talk about, whether it's your unmet communications, your past traumas, some childhood of origin issues, or some kind of significant event that happened in your life, or even some bad experience you had in a previous relationship. Those are all things that we're going to carry over into our present relationship.
Yes.
That can have a big impact if we don't really get those personal standards. I call them like personal standards. We all have them.
Yeah, I think standards are different from intervals.
Yeah,
I
they
think
are,
that personal
absolutely.
standards are the standards that you set for yourself But I think the inner vows are a result of that's never going to happen to me.
Right.
I'm never going to let anybody hurt me. I'm never going to fall in love again. I think that that's different from you should have values, you should have standards,
Right.
because those are setting boundaries.
Oh,
But I think that when you have inner vows, you close yourself off from someone doing and being a different kind of person, because one of the things about Gil that I have always loved about him is he's always been a person of his word. And just when you're not used to that, it's like, oh, you're looking for someone to fail you.
Right.
And so I think that it's important that we don't allow the past to, like, again with the orange, I don't want to make everything castor oil. I don't want to make everything that everyone does like what happened to me in the past.
And I love the way you said that, because you're going to have disappointment. And that's another one when we talk about unmet expectations. Disappointments and those things that get unmet, and sometimes, unfortunately, it leads to disappointment
It does.
in your relationship, because you're going to have it. That's just another form or root of conflict. But in those, even in those disappointments, you have to look at, if this person didn't openly, consciously, maliciously make them do
Right.
something that is totally against something that they're consciously aware of, that is a as they say, deal breaker for you. If they don't do those things, you have to ask, okay, did I clearly communicate what my needs were in that time? But then if I actually have a disappointment about something that has happened in our relationship, that is something that goes back to the conflict thing that we have to talk about. We have to get out in the open, because the enemy loves nothing more than to keep things in the dark, and for you to keep things personally to yourself. How many of you have had a conversation with your significant other and they don't even know y'all had this conversation? You say something, or like you driving home, well, he gonna say this, then I'm gonna say that, and then he gonna probably say this, and then I'm gonna probably say that, or she's gonna say this. As soon as I walk in the door, she's gonna say that, and then I'm gonna say this.
There's someone has a
It's
question.
yeah, it's a point that you have to make, and you have to get to not just have those conversations with yourself, but have it with your significant other.
So that they know. So there's a question.
And
So
so-
Colleen has a question.
Colin,
Colin,
how can I help my loved one to say no to PPLs when I'm asking them for money, but she won't listen to me? Well, it kind of goes back to the same thing.
that's a good one though.
Expectations and standards. You want to go ahead?
That's a good one, because one of the things we talk about when we are working with couples, we explain to them that they have to really establish new everything. So let's just say if for Christmas I'm used to buying every single person in my family a gift, and Gil is not okay with that. When you come together as a couple, that's something you both have to decide. It can't be that this is what I do and you just have to go along with it. Now it's not me, it's us.
Right.
So I think it's important that you have to reestablish what is going to be the standard moving forward as a couple. And I think a big part of it is just understanding that now that it's two of you,
Right.
it's not just your decision. And it's not like going to your family saying, well, I would buy you gifts, but Gil said no. It's always showing that united front that we have made a decision. So it's up to me to tell my family, we've made a decision that we're not going to do what we used to do anymore as a family. We're going to do something different. So
Right.
hopefully that helps you.
Right. Because it kind of leads to that frustration. Again, that goes into what we're also already talking about, those unmet expectations. It can lead to conflict and frustration.
Right.
When you have expectations and things that you have a requirement for, just like how are we going to decide how we fund or help our family members or people that we know when it comes to money? Money is always one of those topics that is always a hot button issue with a lot of people. So you have to talk about it when nobody's asking for it.
Yeah, and part of it is that it's so important that, and I think this is one of the things that we saw a lot this few weekends ago with our couples, is that the more you are on one accord with your faith and your spiritual beliefs, the easier it is to get in line with all the other things that we're talking about. And I think it's important that you understand that that's a very important part of any relationship, is your relationship with God. That has to be the central focus. And when that's the common denominator, it makes all the other things that we're expecting or your task to do a whole lot easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we kind of talking about some of the things when it comes to your relationship. We talked about unresolved traumas when it comes to your relationship that you bring into your marriage and into
That
your
we all
present,
bring in.
unmet expectations. And then we will probably always talk about with couples with this one is poor communication skills. Notice I call it skills. because communication skills can be learned.
They are. And
Everybody has the
communication is a
ability.
skill. Talking is not a skill. Communication is a skill, and there's a big difference.
And I would even say, take it a step further, effective communication is what you really want to get after when it comes to your relationships, because a lot of times you can be talking, and if somebody's talking, but somebody's not listening, or you're not listening to understand,
Hummingbird.
that you see, she had a
Squirrel,
hummingbird.
look.
We
It's
had
a hummingbird outside, y'all. I'm sorry. Squirrel. See, for Gil's personality, that drives him crazy.
Hey,
You forgive me?
absolutely. I'm used to it. But you got,
I'm
we
sorry,
got
y'all.
guests. And anyway, effective communication,
beautiful.
going back to it, is when you are communicating.
Let's unpack that.
Go
Do you
ahead.
know that could be a major issue? And even with that, that's one of those.
What are we talking about when you say
As
that?
far as me and my squirrel moments, Gil is a very organized thinker. He's very structured. I am like the wind, and we have had to make accommodations for each other. That could have been an argument. He could have got mad and got upset and went off on me for doing something that is, and I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying a part of it in relationships, you have to give room for the other person to be different from you and help them to grow.
I'm glad you think we cute, Kenzie, because it didn't feel that way just a second ago. Because we got company, y'all. And we trying to share some of the things after 35 years. This is one of those moments, 35 years of marital
The
bliss.
hummingbird was so beautiful, y'all. It was so beautiful. It was a hummingbird outside our window.
Yeah, okay. So getting back to what we're talking about, poor communication.
Yes.
We're talking about effective communication. See, I lost my train of thought.
Yes.
We are talking
A
about
part of poor
listening.
communication is even
Go
interrupting.
ahead. Go ahead.
A part of poor communication is understanding that everything about your personality, while you can just say, that's just who I am, it doesn't mean that it's good. And you always have to be willing. I'm under construction, and I'm still growing and learning. And a part of communication is not just talking, it's listening to understand. And I think that one of the things about Gil, he's helped me to learn to be a better listener, because for me, I've said it before, I have a million words, but learning when to use those words and learning how not to allow my words to drown him is something that is still a work in
Yeah.
under
And
construction.
even after 35 years of being together and being married, we're still constantly working on the
growing.
communication process, because it is not something that you are going to master to the point where if you don't continue to do it over and over and over again, that's where you're going to get to misunderstanding. The root of miscommunication is misunderstanding. If you don't have understanding, if that's your goal and that's what you're trying to get to, obviously you're going to get to the opposite, which is a misunderstanding about whatever the topic may be. If somebody is confused or somebody's not being heard, that is something that you have to really get down and think about. Why am I not being understood? Is it, and 9 times out of 10, it's not because Renee is talking over me over and over and over again. More than likely, I have to look at me and say, okay, what is it that I want to say? How do I need to say it? And then am I communicating it to the point where she understands it? Not how I said it, but how she understands it. Because yeah, I can talk all day, but if she doesn't understand what I'm trying to communicate, then you have communication breakdown.
Yeah. And I think a part of it is understanding that I think for women, because we are so good at using our words, I think that when you learn to be a better listener, and I know just because, and I constantly tell them, I'm constantly trying to get better at this. I don't think I am finished. I don't think that I'm gonna always be in a construction. And I think it's important that you guys see real moments of us being who we are, you know, because this is not scripted. This is just us being us and us sharing. Yeah, we have an outline so we can stay on task, but we want to be real people sharing real life with you so that you guys have someone that you can walk alongside with, not just somebody that's going to just be showing you the perfect life, because we don't have a perfect life.
No, absolutely. So what we're talking about is problems that people bring into their marriages and their relationships, and some of the root causes that you can actually think about. We already covered some of the unresolved past traumas that you have, whether it's from your childhood, excuse me, or from previous relationship or even events that have happened in your life. We're talking about some unmet expectations that happen. Everybody has them. Sometimes they can be your family of origin and the history that you're doing. Sometimes we make these inner vows and these personal statements to ourselves that our significant other, or as you say here, no, we're not brother and sister, we're husband
We're
and wife.
husband and wife.
Yeah, you start looking alike with your person over the years. That's what actually happened. We talked a little bit about a hummingbird. Yeah, we did. We talked about the hummingbird.
It was so beautiful. I wish I could have saw
Some of the frustrations that happen, even when it comes to unmet expectations. And now we're talking about communication as we kind of get close to wrapping up this live that we're talking about with Gil and Renee from the Rich Relationship Refuge.
And we want to give you chances if you have
Yeah, and it was a
relationship
question. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, if you have relationship questions, or if there's a topic you want us to cover. Next week, we're going to have our friends, our rich friends are going to be on our episode, so we're not going to go live. During the summer, we're probably only going to go live together twice a month. But if you guys know, I go live a couple of times a week because for me, I have more time than Gil does. But I still want you to know what's going on in our real life and how we navigate real life situations, cooking, all the things that you do as a couple. And so we want to share some of that with you guys.
So, and then the last one we want to talk about is assumptions that actually gets the root of those misunderstandings. How many of you have made assumptions in your relationship about something when it comes to communication?
Yeah.
Or something that you think was said really wasn't, or you filled in the gap, or you filled in that blank of the topic that you thought was talking about, or you credit the person with the negative versus the positive for when it comes down to whatever you're talking about. You know,
and I think about that when you talk about as far as the ability to listen, to understand. If I'm listening to Gil to understand, I'm not going to be coming to assumptions. So if the things we're talking about, if you would practice them, one of my girlfriends, we were talking, she was saying, a lot of the stuff that you say, I really just thought I understood what you were saying, but it was just over my head. And so a lot of things we're saying may seem unrealistic, it may seem difficult, it may seem challenging. It was that way for us, and some of them are still for us, but you got to practice. You got to get the reps in. You got to do it. You got to be willing to do the things we're talking about. Don't just listen to us. Physically do it. Yeah. Try it. You know, one of the things we told our couples, and I think it was really good, when we had them, when they're talking, we have them to sit and face each other and touch each other, because there's something about touching each other. It's so hard to be mad at somebody and pray for them. And it's even harder to be mad at somebody and to touch them.
Because we dare you to try this the next time you have a not so good moment. It may not be a full-blown knockdown conflict, but next time you're in a disagreement, hold hands and talk about the subject, whatever it may be. I dare you to challenge. Yeah. Because when you make contact with the person you care the most about and you're in a disagreement or you have a problem with, it's going to automatically disarm you.
And God did that. God made us that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's something about physical touch.
So we had a question earlier about someone here that, and that's the topic that we talked about. So hopefully you got something out of the subject that we talked about when it came to the problems that people bring into their marriage, but also into their relationships. And I'm going to scroll back a little bit because even though this is not on topic, I think that's Joanne Sanchez says, even though it's not on topic, that's why we're here to talk about things as it relates to your relationships. It says, why is it hard? Why is grieving hard for some people? And it's some people, others, and get better sooner. Why do some people get better at it sooner? And this is something that Renee is really, really good at. So I'm going to let her take it and start it out when it comes to the grieving.
There's a difference between grieving and mourning. I'll start by saying we have had all of our parents to die, grandparents. We just lost one of our friends a few weeks ago. So grieving is something we are very familiar with. But what I realized was that most people just mourn. They just move on. Whereas grieving is allowing yourself to sit in it and feel the pain and feel the disappointment and to feel the depression and the anger and all the stages of it. So sometimes the reason why people are getting their grief is faster because they're really not grieving. They're probably just mourning. and the only person that can tell you that is you. I think sometimes as Christians we feel like, oh no, I just thank the Lord.
They're in
It's
a better
okay.
place and all those
God
things. Yeah.
created you human. Embrace your humanity. Allow yourself to go through the process of grief, because grief is a process. Depression is one of the stages of grief, but I think we sometimes forget. We focus on the depression and not what caused it. It's normally a loss. And so we have to understand that. And so I hope that answers your question. But there is no 7 days or 20 days. It's different for every person. And it also has a lot to do with the relationship you had with the person. The closer you are to someone, the harder it's going to
Right.
be when you lose them. So two people won't have the same amount of time to grieve if you are both grieving. Now, mourning, if you mourn, I mean, you're
That's
just
normal,
walking
yeah.
away.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the same as really grieving.
And that's something that I've experienced, even especially after my mom passed, that it can take a long process. It can take a long time for you to, because I had to really sit back and think about the things that really affected me and the things that really I was missing, and really go through those feelings, and whether it's anger, frustration, all the things that when it comes to grieving that you're going to go through, but it's different for everyone. You can't compare what you're going through
Yeah.
with someone else, whether it's a sibling or friend or family member, because you're different.
Yeah.
And you got to give yourself the grace and the mercy to be able to experience.
And sometimes it may not hit you at the same time. Sometimes it may hit you, like I know for me, because I was the kind of person, I never really grieved. And when I just mourned, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sad, I just moved on. I never allowed myself to be disappointed or sad or hurt. But when I did grieve was actually when Mother Day died. That was the first time I ever really grieved. And it was years later, but it took me down for like weeks.
Yeah.
So,
And just like you said here, Joanne, yeah, even if it's been 4 years, that's okay.
yeah.
It's normal for you to have, that means that the relationship was something you really value. You know, if you have still moments where you're still sad, because there could be a passing fleeting moment. You may see something or hear something that reminds you of that person, and you have that temporary moment of sadness. That's okay. That's normal. I think, because I got pictures all around the house of my mom, and when I see her, I still automatically think about it. But over time, I started thinking about the good things, and the things that were make you smile a little bit.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you chiming in, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
It's just not talking about topics that we can put up here, because like you going to a seminar, that's not what it's all about. We want to talk to real people when it comes to what you're really going through in any of your relationships, whether it's your marital, because that's what we primarily do, but also any relationship that you may be in. We just want to help wherever we can.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your comment there that someone says it's refreshing to see a godly couple on YouTube. Thanks there for Jade. We appreciate Ruben. Thank you.
That
Appreciate
is
that.
why we are here, because everyone talks about how social media is bad. And when the Lord told us to do this, it's like, go to where they are. I'm like, where? He said the
Right
internet.
there.
The internet. And we've been putting more content out, and because a part of it is that people need to see what God honoring marriages look like. How can we expect for people to want to have a God honoring marriage if they never see what one looks like? And so, I appreciate you guys watching and sharing and being a part of our community. We realize that it's about reaching people. I have totally given up. I tried to do it YouTube's way for a whole 12 months. And now I said, Lord, we're just going to do
put
what
it out.
the Lord told us to do. We're just going to put it out there.
And I love because I scroll through and I look at some of the topics that I love. And I thank God for the single people who are actually having conversations, which are good. But the things you have to be mindful about, a single talking to a single only can talk about single. We've been single, we've been married 35 years. And so we have gained experience over working with couples for over 19 years. Maybe those are the tidbits and the things that we're trying to share with you. So if you're trying to get from point A to point B, which is from singleness to marriage, and how you should be acting or going along in marriage, and some of the traits, you probably want to talk to somebody who's already doing it, not to somebody who has had a string of broken relationships, or as they say, a high body count, that really don't know what it takes to establish and maintain and sustain a relationship.
Yeah. And so we really love, just spending time with you guys, sharing, because we realize there's so much going on in the world, and there's so much negativity, and there's so much reality that's not reality, that we have to do our part to make sure that people have people that they can go to and talk to and ask questions. And I think even when it comes to the question about grief, I think that if you find that you are struggling to get over, that is when you need to see a therapist. Because one of the things I realize is that if I allow myself to only focus on, oh my gosh, how am I going to move on? My life is over. It's the conversation you're having with yourself too. Yes, you should be sad. Yes, you should be, but it can't be the end of your life. And if that's what you're struggling with, that's different. We believe that it is important to get professional help.
Yep.
You need marriage coaches, you need counselors, you need
Therapists,
therapists,
all that.
psychiatrists. You need all of that. Jesus, the blood, the word. Sometimes you need medication. There's nothing wrong with allowing God's tools to be used to help you to get to a healthy place. So we don't ever want, and it's May and it's getting toward the end of the month. Mental health is a real thing. We need to stop acting like it's not real in the church, because it is real. We need to stop acting like, oh, we just need Jesus. No, sometimes you need Jesus and a whole lot of other stuff too.
Yep. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us for this brief session. We love hanging out with you. So if you got any questions, comments, or anything you want to put, you can put it in the comments for this as it repopulates on YouTube and talks.
Well,
and
actually, it really won't.
Play again?
The comments won't.
Oh, well, sorry.
Yeah.
She handles all this.
But if you guys would please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell notification so that you know when we're live and when we're on. And the app is coming, y'all. The books are coming, y'all. We are really trying to make sure we get rid of all the excuses. You don't like videos? We got a book. You don't like podcasts? We got videos. We're
trying to give it to you all the ways.
All the ways, as my
better.
girls say, all the things. So we love you, and we're just excited about serving you guys, being here with you guys, answering your questions, being a part of your relationships. And so you see, y'all.
So if y'all want to see some of the other content, we got a bunch of videos out there.
900.
Just look for Gil and Renee.
Yes.
Rich Relationships.
Yep. Look at our
You'll
long
see
content.
it all, and we can hang out with you guys.
We'll be here in not this Saturday, but the following Saturday we'll be live again. But I'll be live throughout the week, y'all.
So we'll see you guys later.
We love you guys, and thank you so much for being the best part of our community. We love you so much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.